Howdy, Space Cadets. How many of you remember these things? They're called cap bombs or cap rockets. They're very popular back in the 1950s, and we all played with them. You took a cap from a roll of caps, put it in the nose of this thing, put the thing back together, gave it a toss, and when it hit the pavement, it reported with a loud snap. No, they didn't sound quite like that, but I got to wondering about them even as a kid, how to scale one of these things up, make it a little larger. The idea was originally to fly these things around with radio-controlled model airplanes and drop them, and they'd explode. Of course, one of the problems is if you drop them on the grass, they don't work too effectively. But if you'll notice in one of the videos here, the darn thing does hit the grass and it did go off. And if you have a large enough surface area on the nose piece of this thing, it won't punch into the soil too deeply if the soil's fairly dry, so it'll kind of work. So how would one go about making one of these things? Well, take for example a common ordinary shotgun shell. It has a cap on it, much like a paper cap. It's a percussion cap. It's that little dimple in the center there. When that thing is hit by a firing pin, it fires a little bit of explosive material into the gunpowder charge, igniting the gunpowder charge, and the whole thing goes off. Well, let's give it a try and see if we can make this concept work. First thing you have to do is take the charge out of the shotgun shell, that is the pellets or the slug. That stuff is extremely dangerous and you don't want to leave it in there. You could seriously hurt yourself or someone else if you left that junk in there before you exploded it. The easiest way to do this is just cut around the top of the plastic that covers the shot or the slug and remove that slug or that shot. And then you can remove the wads that are under it, usually I think 3 of them, and you take out the first 2 and leave the remaining one in there. They can simply be removed by driving a screw into the wad and then pulling it out. Simple process, easy to do. The next thing you'll need is a couple of pieces of wood. Now I used wood because it's a lot safer than having a lot of metal flying around if this darn thing explodes. The wood is not as dense as metal, so it won't penetrate very far through the air before it slows down and becomes safe. You can get a 1-inch dowel at just about any hardware store, or you could probably even use a broom handle or something like that, and cut them off so they're just about the same length as the open part of the chamber above the shotgun shell, and one of them has to have a hole drilled in the center of it for the nail to go through. For the bomb body, I chose a piece of electrical conduit tubing. That's the PVC variety, not metal variety. That again would be very dangerous to put that in a piece of metal. In case something goes wrong, that metal is possibly going to explode and you're going to have shrapnel flying around, and that's not good. Whereas the PVC is relatively harmless if it explodes. And I chose a 3/4 inside diameter. Now assemble the parts as shown in the picture here. The shotgun shell goes in first, followed by the wooden part with the hole in it and the nail sticking through it with the head facing toward the front, and then the other block goes in on top of that so that when it hits the ground it'll push against the nail and push it into the percussion cap in the shotgun shell, and the shotgun shell will go off. This picture now shows the device essentially assembled, except the tail fins, and one should also put some tape over the nose of it to hold all those pieces in place. I strongly suggest you don't assemble this device entirely until you're ready to use it, because if you accidentally drop it, it's going to be close to you when it goes off, and you don't want to have that happen. Also, have you ever been in a room when somebody fired a shotgun? That's not good for your ears. You don't want that to happen. So it's probably better not to assemble the device completely. An alternative would be to put a safety pin in there to keep the firing pin from hitting the percussion cap on the shotgun shell until you pull that pin out, which arms the device. Now, I know some of you ninnies are going to complain about how crudely this device is assembled, especially the tail fins. But remember, this is just a proof of concept device, and I've used it 4 times now, and it's gone off every time, and it works perfectly. And the tail fin's merely made of thin cardboard, and they're just taped in place, but they do the trick. You can certainly use a plastic fin or something like that. It'll work much better, and you can repeatedly use it in that case. Whereas with this thing, 1 or 2 tosses and the tail fins usually tend to get bent up or come off or something like that. But they're very simple to make, and they're basically effective enough for a test device. So here's a short clip of my eager crew, all of whom want to become YouTube stars one day. And this is their first appearance, so welcome them. And now a couple more clips of the device going off. The sound recording doesn't do justice to the amount of noise this thing makes. Cell phone cameras do not have real good recording microphones on them, and so it sounds like a pretty minimal pop, but it makes a very loud bang, and at least in that first video clip, you hear the echo off the hills half a mile away, so it's making quite a bit of noise. Another thing I wanted to try is to put a very small rocket motor, a model rocket motor, in the other end of this thing and fire it at, say, a 45-degree angle or something like that. But you need a large open area with relatively hard surface. And you also have to make sure that this thing is aerodynamically stable before you do that. If you don't know what aerodynamically stable means, perhaps you better not mess with it. Have fun and be safe. Remember, don't throw it anywhere near people, and do not stuff something in that open tube above the shotgun shell. If you do that and something goes wrong, that whole thing can explode. And don't go adding extra powder to it or anything like that, because you can convert this thing into a real bomb, and it could really, really be dangerous. Go ahead and have fun, but play safely with it.